The sound of my brother's fork hitting his plate was the only noise in the suddenly silent restaurant. I watched as every face at the family table turned toward the television mounted on the wall behind me, their expressions shifting from smug superiority to something I couldn't quite name yet. Tonight on Forbes Business Report, the anchor continued, her voice filling the expensive steakhouse, we're profiling the tech industry's most secretive success story. Chen built CloudSync Technologies from her garage into a $4.2 billion empire in just 5 years. And she did it without a single press release, interview, or public appearance. My mother's wine glass trembled in her hand. My father's face had gone pale. My sister-in-law's mouth hung open, her phone frozen halfway to the table. And Marcus, my brother, the one who just told me to stop embarrassing the family with my pretend company, looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. The screen behind me displayed my company's logo, then my headshot from the Forbes website I'd reluctantly agreed to provide. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. I could see it all reflected in their horrified faces. The company revolutionized cloud infrastructure security, the anchor explained, serving over 2,000 enterprise clients including Fortune 500 companies. Industry analysts estimate Chen's personal net worth at $1.8 billion. I took a sip of my water. Waited. This dinner had been coming for 5 years, and I'd learned that silence was often the most powerful response of all. The scapegoat daughter. Growing up as the youngest of 3 children in the Chen family meant living in the shadow of my older siblings' achievements. Marcus graduated top of his class from business school and landed a position at a prestigious consulting firm. My sister Emily became a successful corporate lawyer. They were the golden children, the ones my parents bragged about at country club dinners. I was the odd one out. The computer science major who spent weekends coding instead of networking. The daughter who chose a modest apartment over the luxury condo my parents offered to buy, with strings attached, of course. The family disappointment who actually seemed to enjoy working with technology more than people. Maya's always been different, my mother would say, her tone making different sound like a diagnosis. Not ambitious like Marcus. Not polished like Emily. The dismissal started early. When I got my first programming job at 22, Marcus called it cute. When I told them I was starting my own company at 27 working out of my garage, the reaction was worse than dismissal. It was pity. A tech startup? My father had said, his voice dripping with concern. Maya, honey, 90% of startups fail. You have a perfectly good job. Why risk it? Because I believe in what I'm building, I'd said simply. Marcus had laughed. Believing doesn't pay the bills, Maya. That's not how the real world works. The next 5 years were a blur of 80-hour work weeks, failed pitches, near bankruptcies and breakthrough moments. I built CloudSync Technologies with 2 co-founders from MIT, developing encryption technology that made cloud storage exponentially more secure. We were solving a problem that every major corporation faced, and we were doing it better than anyone else in the market. But I never told my family about the victories. Not when we landed our first Fortune 500 client. Not when we secured series of funding of $15 million. Not when we grew to 50 employees, then 200, then 500. Not when Amazon, Google, and Microsoft all became clients. Not when our valuation hit $1 billion and I became a paper billionaire at age 30. Why didn't I tell them? At first, it was superstition, I didn't want to jinx it. Then it became strategy. I wanted to see how long they'd underestimate me. How long they'd keep dismissing my little garage project, while I built an empire they couldn't even imagine. The comments got worse as time went on. At family dinners, Marcus would talk about his latest consulting project, managing a $10 million client engagement, and everyone would hang on his every word. When they'd reluctantly ask about my work and I'd say something vague about cloud security, the conversation would die. Still playing with computers? My father would ask, his disappointment barely masked. Still working out of your garage? My mother would add, as if I were a perpetual teenager. I'd moved into a 50,000 square foot headquarters 2 years ago. I had 700 employees. But I never corrected them. I just smiled and changed the subject. The breaking point came 3 months ago at Emily's birthday party. Marcus had just gotten promoted to senior partner at his firm, and my parents were celebrating like he'd won the Nobel Prize. When someone politely asked about my work, Marcus interrupted. Maya's still doing her little tech thing, he'd said dismissively. Some kind of security software. I don't really understand it. Pretty niche stuff. But hey, at least she's doing something she enjoys, right? The room had filled with polite, pitying laughter. My mother had actually patted my hand sympathetically, as if consoling a child who'd tried their best but still lost the race. That night I made a decision. I authorized my PR team to respond to Forbes' repeated interview requests. I agreed to the profile. I knew exactly which week it would air, and I knew my family would be at Marcus's favorite restaurant on that exact night because my mother had mentioned the reservation weeks ago. I wasn't hiding anymore. I was just choosing my moment, building in silence. While my family dismissed me as a hobbyist, I was building something extraordinary. CloudSync Technologies wasn't just another tech startup. We were revolutionizing an entire industry. The technology we developed used quantum-resistant encryption combined with AI-driven threat detection. It was security infrastructure that could predict and prevent breaches before they happened. In a world where data breaches cost companies millions, we were offering something invaluable: peace of mind. Our first major breakthrough came in year 2 when we landed a contract with a Fortune 100 financial services company. They'd been breached twice in 18 months, losing customer data and millions in regulatory fines. We implemented our system and their security incidents dropped to zero. Word spread through the industry like wildfire. By year 3, we had 50 enterprise clients and revenue of $75 million. By year 4, we'd expanded internationally and our client list read like a who's who of global corporations. 3 of the big 5 banks, 2 of the largest tech companies, pharmaceutical giants, defense contractors and government agencies. The offers started coming in. Amazon wanted to acquire us for $800 million. I said no. Microsoft offered $1.2 billion. I said no. We weren't interested in being absorbed into a larger company. We were building something that would stand on its own. My co-founders became my real family. Dr. Sarah Kim, my CTO, had been dismissed by her previous employer for being too ambitious. James Rodriguez, our CFO, had been told he'd never make it past middle management. Together we built something that proved all our doubters wrong. Why don't you tell your family? Sarah asked me once after we closed a $200 million Series C funding round. Because they wouldn't believe it, I'd said. And watching them underestimate me has become surprisingly useful. It keeps me humble. It reminds me why I'm doing this, not for their approval but because the work matters. But that wasn't entirely true. Part of me was also waiting for the right moment. The moment when their dismissal would become so complete, so public, that the reversal would be undeniable. I lived modestly by billionaire standards. A nice townhouse, not a mansion. Tesla, not a Ferrari. I wore jeans and hoodies to work. I flew commercial, not private. The only people who knew the full scope of my success were my board of directors, my leadership team, and my investors, who included some of the biggest names in venture capital. My strategy was simple. Stay invisible until the success became impossible to ignore. Let the work speak for itself. And when the revelation came, let it come from the most credible source possible. Not from me bragging at a family dinner but from Forbes, the Wall Street Journal, the business publications that my family respected. That moment had finally arrived. The dinner. The dinner had started with Marcus's usual performance. He'd spent 20 minutes describing his latest consulting project, name-dropping executives and throwing around numbers designed to impress. My parents had listened with rapt attention, asking questions that prompted even more elaborate answers. So the CEO personally called to thank me, Marcus had said, swirling his $200 wine. Said I'd saved them at least $5 million with my strategic recommendations. That's wonderful, sweetheart, my mother had gushed. So impressive. Then my father had made the mistake of trying to include me in the conversation. And Maya, how's your computer work going? Before I could answer, Marcus had jumped in. Oh, Maya's still calling herself CEO of CloudSync. He'd said it with a chuckle like it was an inside joke. Still working on that security thing. It's actually going well, I'd said mildly. Marcus had waved his hand dismissively. I'm sure. But Maya, seriously, at some point you need to stop calling yourself CEO of your pretend company. It's embarrassing for the whole family. My colleagues ask about you and I don't know what to say. My sister plays tech entrepreneur. It reflects poorly on all of us. My mother had nodded sympathetically. Honey, Marcus is right. It's time to be realistic. You're 32 now. Maybe it's time to look for a stable position at an established company. Emily had chimed in. I could help with your resume. I have contacts in corporate HR. I'd taken a breath, checking my watch. 7:48 p.m. The Forbes Business Report aired at 7:45. Any second now. I understand, I'd said simply. That's when the anchor's voice had cut through the restaurant's ambient noise. Strategic silence. The preparation for this moment had actually started 3 months earlier when Forbes first reached out. They'd been trying to interview me for 2 years, but I'd always declined. I didn't need the publicity. Our clients found us through reputation and word of mouth in the enterprise security world. But after Emily's birthday party, after Marcus's dismissive comments, after years of being treated like the family failure, I made a different choice. Let's do it, I told my PR director Jennifer. Full profile. Company valuation, client list. Everything they want to know. Jennifer had been thrilled. Finally. Do you know how many times they've asked? This will be huge for our brand. I have one condition, I'd said. I want to know exactly when it airs. And I need it to be during the week of March 15th. She'd looked confused but agreed. Forbes was happy to accommodate. They'd been chasing this story for years. The interview process was exhaustive. They wanted everything. The origin story, the technology, the funding rounds, the client acquisitions, the near failures, the triumphs. They sent photographers to our headquarters. They interviewed my co-founders, my investors, even some of our clients who agreed to go on record. You've built something remarkable, the reporter had said during our final interview. But I have to ask, why now? Why agree to this profile after turning us down for so long? I'd smiled. Because the work can speak for itself now. I don't need to convince anyone of anything. The results are undeniable. It was true, but it wasn't the whole truth. The whole truth was simpler. I was tired of being invisible. Tired of strategic humility. Tired of watching my family celebrate mediocrity while dismissing excellence they couldn't even recognize. When I learned the piece would air on March 16th at 7:45 p.m., I did something calculated. I mentioned to my mother that I'd love to join their monthly family dinner. She'd seemed surprised. I usually found excuses to skip, but pleased. Marcus made reservations at Bellissimo, she'd said. You know how he loves that place. Perfect. Bellissimo had televisions throughout the dining room, always tuned to financial news. Marcus had chosen the location himself. The timing was perfect. The location was perfect. All I had to do was show up and let the truth reveal itself. The reveal. The television continued, oblivious to the family drama unfolding at table 12. Chen started CloudSync Technologies in her garage with 2 co-founders, the anchor explained. The company's proprietary encryption technology quickly attracted attention from major corporations concerned about data security. The screen showed footage of our headquarters, a gleaming glass building in Silicon Valley, our logo prominent on the facade. Then images of our client list scrolled past. Amazon, Microsoft, Bank of America, Pfizer, Boeing. Names that made Marcus's $5 million consulting project look like pocket change. Maya? My mother's voice was barely a whisper. That's you. I turned to look at her calmly. Yes. But you said, we thought. My father couldn't finish the sentence. The company's latest funding round valued CloudSync at $4.2 billion, the TV announced. Making Chen one of the youngest self-made female billionaires in the technology sector. Marcus's face had gone from pale to red. For billion. That can't be real. It's real, I said simply, taking another sip of water. The piece continued with interview footage of Sarah, my CTO, standing in front of our server rooms. Maya has an extraordinary vision, she said on screen. She saw the future of cloud security before anyone else. Companies trust us with their most sensitive data because of the technology she helped create. Then footage of me in our main conference room wearing the same casual style I always did. Jeans and a blazer. We're not trying to be the biggest, I was saying to the interviewer. We're trying to be the best. Every client we take on, we treat their security like it's our own family's safety at stake. You knew, Marcus said, his voice shaking with something between anger and disbelief. All this time you've been sitting here listening to us, and you knew. Yes. Why didn't you tell us? My mother asked, tears forming in her eyes. I set down my water glass carefully. This was the moment I'd been waiting for, but now that it was here, I felt no triumph. Just a deep, weary sadness for all the years we'd wasted. Because you wouldn't have believed me, I said quietly. If I'd told you 3 years ago that I'd built a billion-dollar company, what would you have said? Silence. You would have laughed, I continued. Or worse, you would have looked at me with that same pitying expression. Maya's delusional now. Maya's pretending again. So I stopped trying to make you see me. I built something so undeniable that even you couldn't dismiss it. Despite operating with virtually no public profile, the TV continued, CloudSync has become the gold standard in enterprise security. When asked why she stayed out of the spotlight, Chen told us, I wanted the work to speak for itself. Emily had finally found her voice. We had no idea. You never said anything. I tried in the beginning, I said. Do you remember when I first started the company? Dad told me 90% of startups fail. Mom suggested I get a real job. Marcus called it cute. Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it again. Every family dinner for 5 years, you've asked about my work in a tone that said you didn't really want to know. You've called it my little tech thing, my garage project, my pretend company. Tonight, Marcus, you literally told me it was embarrassing for the family that I call myself Su. The segment on TV was wrapping up. CloudSync Technologies currently employs over 700 people and serves more than 2,000 enterprise clients worldwide. Chen's success story is particularly remarkable because she built it without fanfare, focusing entirely on the product and her clients. She's proof that in tech the best marketing is often just being undeniably excellent at what you do. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah, watching the segment. You okay? I typed back quickly, better than okay. Talk tomorrow. Maya, my father said, his voice heavy with something I'd never heard from him before, regret. We didn't know. How could we have known if you never told us? You could have asked, I said simply. You could have been curious instead of dismissive. You could have believed in me the way I believed in myself. Marcus was staring at his plate, his earlier confidence completely deflated. I didn't mean. I was just worried about you. Were you? I asked quietly. Or were you worried about how my choices reflected on you? Because tonight you said my calling myself CEO was embarrassing for the whole family. But the truth is, Marcus, I am a CEO of a company worth more than any company you've ever consulted for. And you didn't know because you never bothered to really look. The silence at our table was deafening. Around us, other diners had noticed the drama unfolding. Some were sneaking glances at our table, probably recognizing me now from the TV segment. What do we do now? My mother asked, her voice small. I stood up, placing my napkin on the table. Now I'm going to leave. I have an early board meeting tomorrow. We're discussing a potential expansion into the European market. Maya, wait, Emily said, reaching out. I paused, looking at my family, really looking at them. They seemed smaller somehow, diminished by the revelation. I'm not angry, I said, and it was true. I'm just done pretending to be less than I am to make you comfortable. If you want to be part of my life going forward, it has to be on terms that respect who I actually am, not who you thought I should be. I pulled out my wallet and placed $300 bills on the table. Dinner's on me. Consider it a thank you. A thank you. Marcus looked confused. For what? I smiled. A real smile this time, not the polite mask I'd been wearing for years. For underestimating me. Kept me hungry. It reminded me every day why I was building CloudSync. Not for your approval, but because I believed in something you couldn't see. That clarity was invaluable. As I walked toward the exit, I heard my mother calling after me, but I didn't turn around. My phone was already ringing. Probably reporters who'd seen the Forbes piece, or investors wanting meetings, or clients reaching out to congratulate me on the profile. I stepped out into the cool evening air, feeling lighter than I had in years. The aftermath. The Forbes profile went viral. Within 24 hours, my LinkedIn had 50,000 connection requests. My email was flooded with interview requests, speaking invitations, and congratulations from people I'd gone to college with and hadn't spoken to in a decade. But the most interesting messages came from my family. Marcus texted first, the morning after the dinner. Maya, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. Can we talk? Then Emily, I've been doing some thinking. You were right about everything. I'm sorry for how we treated you. My mother called 3 times before I answered. Sweetheart, your father and we want to make this right. We had no idea how successful you'd become. We're so proud of you. That word, proud. It was the one I'd been waiting to hear for 5 years. But now that I heard it, it felt hollow. They weren't proud of the woman who'd worked 80-hour weeks in a garage. They were impressed by the billionaire on Forbes. Thank you, I told her. But I need some time. The media attention was intense but manageable. Our PR team had prepared for it, and I gave exactly 3 interviews, to the Wall Street Journal, TechCrunch, and a podcast about women in tech. Each time I made the same point. Success isn't about proving people wrong. It's about building something that matters. But privately I knew the truth. Part of me had been proving them wrong. And that realization made me understand something important. I needed to let that go. The next phase of my life couldn't be defined by their dismissal any more than it should be defined by their belated approval. 2 weeks after the Forbes profile aired, Marcus showed up at my office unannounced. My assistant called up uncertain. Your brother is here. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's important. I thought about turning him away. But curiosity won out. Send him up. When he walked into my corner office, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Silicon Valley, awards and patents on the walls, he looked diminished. Not physically but in the way he carried himself. This is incredible, he said, looking around. Maya, I don't even know where to start. Start with why you're here, I said, not unkindly. He sat down across from my desk, running his hands through his hair. I've been thinking about that dinner. About everything I said. About everything I've been saying for 5 years. And I was wrong. Not just about your company. About you. I spent so much time trying to feel successful by comparison that I completely missed what you were actually building. I'm sorry, Maya. Really, genuinely sorry. I studied my brother's face, looking for signs of insincerity. But all I saw was genuine remorse. And something else, recognition. He was finally seeing me. Thank you, I said. That means something. 6 months later. The relationship with my family didn't heal overnight. But slowly, carefully, we started rebuilding on a foundation of truth rather than assumptions. My parents came to visit CloudSync headquarters. I gave them the full tour. The server rooms, the R&D labs, the collaborative workspaces where 700 employees built the future of data security. I introduced them to Sarah and James, my co-founders who'd become the siblings my real siblings never quite managed to be. I wish we'd seen this sooner, my father said quietly, standing in our main conference room where deals worth hundreds of millions had been negotiated. You could have, I said gently. I was always willing to share. You just had to ask instead of dismiss. Emily started referring her law firm's corporate clients to us for security audits. Marcus, in a surprisingly humble move, asked if I'd be willing to speak at his firm about building successful tech companies. I agreed, not because I needed the validation but because I'd learned something valuable about my own capacity for forgiveness. The bigger lesson, though, came from watching how the story spread. I received hundreds of messages from people who felt dismissed by their families, who were building something in the shadows, who were told they'd never amount to anything. Your story gave me courage, one woman wrote. I've been hiding my business success from my judgmental mother for 3 years. After seeing your Forbes profile, I finally told her the truth. That's when I realized the real value of going public wasn't in proving my family wrong. It was in showing others that validation from people who dismissed you is far less important than validation from yourself and from the work you do. CloudSync continued to grow. We expanded to Europe and Asia. Our client list grew to include governments and international corporations. The company that started in my garage now had offices in 12 countries. But the success that mattered most wasn't measured in billions or client contracts. It was measured in the team we'd built. People who believed in the mission, who respected each other, who never had to hide their achievements to make others comfortable. At our annual company celebration, Sarah raised her glass in a toast. To Maya, who taught us that the best response to doubt isn't anger, it's excellence. 700 people cheered. My parents were there in the audience, finally understanding what I'd been building while they'd been dismissing. Marcus was there too, no longer threatened by my success but genuinely proud of his little sister. Later that night, as I stood on the balcony of our headquarters looking out over Silicon Valley, my phone buzzed. A text from my mother. I'm sorry it took us so long to see you. But I'm grateful we finally do. I typed back, me too. And I meant it. Because the journey from dismissed daughter to respected CEO had taught me something invaluable. You don't need everyone to believe in you. You just need to believe in yourself enough to build something undeniable. The pretend company was never pretend. It was just waiting for the right people to finally open their eyes and see what had been there all along.